There is a silence that feels heavier than sound. It comes late at night when the noise fades and the world grows still. You lie there, eyes open in the dark, and your thoughts begin to whisper. At first, they seem harmless, random fragments of memory, faint echoes of the day. But slowly, something deeper starts to surface. Questions you've avoided, feelings you've buried, truths you've denied. That's when you start to feel it. The unease. A quiet terror crawling from within, reminding you that the most dangerous place you can ever be is alone with your own mind. We've built an entire world around avoiding this moment. We flood ourselves with light, noise, distraction, anything to drown out that internal voice. Because when the mind grows quiet, it becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, we don't always like what we see. We fear our thoughts, not because they can hurt us, but because they expose us. They strip away the masks we wear, the roles, the identities, the illusions of control. They remind us that behind all of it, there's something raw, something untamed, something we don't fully understand. The fear of our thoughts is the fear of truth, and truth, when it appears without permission, can be unbearable. We spend our lives trying to curate who we are. We edit our memories, polish our emotions, delete the parts that don't fit the story we want to tell. But our mind, the subconscious, it remembers everything. It keeps the records we try to burn. Every lie we tell ourselves, every thought we suppress, every moment we pretend we were fine when we weren't. They linger, waiting for the silence to come back. And when it does, they speak. That's why silence scares us, because silence has a memory. We live in an age where constant distraction has become a survival mechanism. We scroll endlessly, not to learn, but to forget. To bury the thought before it becomes a question, before it becomes real. Our digital lives are the perfect cage. We built them to connect, but instead, they disconnect us from ourselves. We fear solitude because it removes the noise that keeps us safe from self-awareness. But what if we're not supposed to run from that fear? What if the thoughts we avoid are not enemies, but messengers? What if fear itself is the mind's way of trying to show us what we've refused to see? It's not insanity to question yourself. It's the beginning of clarity. In psychology, the unconscious is not a monster. It's a mirror. It holds the forgotten fragments of who we are, waiting for integration. But integration is painful. It means confronting what you've labeled unacceptable. It means realizing that darkness is not an intruder. It's part of your design. That's why we run. Not from evil, but from depth. We fear depth because it demands honesty. We have all been taught to fear the shadow, the side of us that feels envy, anger, despair, desire, doubt. We call it weakness. We call it corruption. We hide it behind politeness and productivity. But in truth, the shadow is not your enemy. It's your reflection. The half of you that carries everything the light refused to hold. And when you refuse to face it, it grows stronger. Not as a ghost haunting your nights, but as a quiet distortion shaping your days. Every unacknowledged emotion becomes behavior. Every denied thought becomes projection. Every suppressed fear becomes the story you unconsciously live out. That's why awareness hurts. It shatters the illusion that you are ever fully in control. We are terrified of our own thoughts because we sense their power. A single realization can dismantle an entire identity. A single moment of self-awareness can expose the fragility of everything we believe we are. And yet, that's where freedom begins. The greatest paradox of the mind is that the very thing we avoid, introspection, is the only path to peace. But peace doesn't come from silence alone. It comes from listening, from having the courage to face what echoes within. Ask yourself, what am I really afraid to think? Is it the thought itself, or what it might reveal about me? The human mind is not a battlefield between good and evil. It's a spectrum, a universe of contradictions. Within it lies both the capacity for destruction and the seed of creation. Both the shadow and the light are necessary. We fear our thoughts because they show us the totality of who we are. And totality is overwhelming. The truth is, you can't selectively numb the mind. When you suppress pain, you also dull joy. When you bury anger, you bury passion. When you reject fear, you reject growth. To think deeply is to feel deeply, and to feel deeply is to live vulnerably. That's what terrifies us most, not the darkness itself, but the surrender it demands. The abyss we fear is not beneath us, it's inside us. Fear thrives in the unknown, and the mind, in its infinite complexity, is the greatest unknown of all. We look to the stars and call it exploration, but we rarely look inward, because what lives there isn't made of light. When we close our eyes, we enter a world with no boundaries, a world that remembers everything we've ever tried to forget. Every image, every feeling, every moment of shame or regret. The mind never erases, it only hides. And when you start to listen, really listen, you begin to understand that thought itself is not the enemy. It's the silence between the thoughts that terrifies us, that vast, infinite void where the self begins to dissolve. Because when the mind turns inward, there's no one left to blame. There's no audience, no distraction, no mask. Only you, facing the echoes of yourself. That's the real abyss. Not death, not madness, but awareness. To be fully conscious is to realize how fragile your sanity really is. We balance on a line thinner than thought, between control and chaos, order and surrender. And the deeper you go, the more you realize the walls we build to protect ourselves are the same walls that keep us trapped. We crave certainty. We fear contradiction. We cling to the comfort of definition, good, bad, right, wrong, because the gray space between them feels infinite, and infinity terrifies us because it can't be controlled. But that gray space, that tension between opposites, is where truth lives, and it's where the mind resists the most. In the quiet depths of consciousness, you begin to see patterns. You begin to recognize that your fears are not random. They are messages, coded emotional truths
trying to surface. The fear of your thoughts is a signal. It means your mind is trying to speak. But we drown it. We medicate it. We rationalize it. We treat every flicker of discomfort as an error in the system, when in fact, it's the system trying to heal. Our fear of thinking is not about danger. It's about exposure. The exposure of who we truly are when there's nothing left to perform. We pretend that darkness is foreign, that it exists outside us, in other people, in other lives, in stories and screens. But darkness has always been home. It's the soil from which consciousness grows. Without it, we would never see the light at all. The more you resist it, the more it consumes you. But the moment you acknowledge it, it starts to transform. You begin to notice that every dark thought carries light within it, a question, a clue, a truth buried beneath fear. The thoughts we avoid most are often the ones that hold the key to who we could become. Every suppressed emotion, every unspoken truth is a door you've refused to open. But doors, even locked, still exist. And with time, the mind starts knocking.
You feel it in anxiety, in restlessness, in the constant need for distraction. You call it boredom, fatigue, burnout, but it's none of those things. It's resistance. It's the weight of the thoughts you won't let rise. The paradox is that once you face them, they lose their power. Once you give form to the shapeless, the shadow turns to substance. Once you name the fear, it stops being infinite. What you fear most about your mind is not its darkness, it's its depth. Because depth means change, and change threatens the illusion of who you think you are. But maybe that illusion was never meant to last. Maybe sanity isn't the absence of chaos, but the ability to walk through it without losing yourself. Maybe the real measure of strength is not control, but surrender. You feel it in anxiety, in restlessness, in the constant need for distraction. You call it boredom, fatigue, burnout. But it's none of those things. It's resistance. It's the weight of the thoughts you won't let rise. The paradox is that once you face them, they lose their power. Once you give form to the shapeless, the shadow turns to substance. Once you name the fear, it stops being infinite. What you fear most about your mind is not its darkness, it's its depth. Because depth means change, and change threatens the illusion of who you think you are. But maybe that illusion was never meant to last. Maybe sanity isn't the absence of chaos, but the ability to walk through it without losing yourself. Maybe the real measure of strength is not control, but surrender. You can't silence the mind. You can only learn to listen to it differently. To understand that every dark corner, every echo, every hidden fragment is part of the whole. And that wholeness is not purity, it's acceptance. There's a beauty in darkness when you stop fighting it. Because the moment you stop resisting, you realize the abyss doesn't devour you, it reveals you.
So the next time you find yourself in silence, don't run. Don't reach for the light. Don't fill the space with noise. Sit with it. Let it unfold. Listen to what your thoughts are trying to tell you. They might whisper things you don't want to hear. They might show you the parts of yourself you've denied. But in that confrontation lies liberation. The mind is not your enemy. It's your reflection. It becomes a prison only when you refuse to enter it. To explore it is to reclaim it. To reclaim it is to remember that fear is not the end, it's the beginning. Because beneath fear lies awareness, and awareness, once awakened, cannot return to sleep. In the quiet spaces between your thoughts, you'll find something unexpected. Peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of understanding. The kind that comes when you stop trying to control what you are and start to witness it instead. You will see that even your darkest thoughts are not threats. They're signs of life, proof that you are still searching, still questioning, still human. We fear our thoughts because they remind us that we are infinite, and infinity is a terrifying thing to hold. But the more you face it, the more it softens. The abyss begins to speak in a familiar voice, your own. It tells you that the mind was never meant to be silent. It was meant to echo, to question, to dream, to fall and rise and fall again. And in those cycles, you begin to understand what consciousness truly is. Not order, but awareness moving through chaos. The mind is not the prison. Fear is. And when you stop fearing the dark, you realize it was light all along. So, listen, not to escape the noise, but to find meaning within it. Not to control the thoughts, but to let them become mirrors instead of monsters. Because in the end, your mind is the story you tell yourself, and the power to rewrite it has always been yours. If this reflection made you pause, stay a little longer. Don't rush back into the noise. Take a breath, look inward, and if you're ready to keep exploring the shadows of the human mind, subscribe. Keep descending within the abyss.